is dark. The night is dark, but I am not forsaken. For by my side, the Savior, He will stay. I labor on in weakness and rejoicing. For in my need, His power is displayed. To this I hold, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will lead. Oh, the night has been won, and I shall overcome, yet not I, but through Christ in me. Christ in me. No fate I dread, no fate I dread. I know I am forgiven. The future sure, the price it has been paid. For Jesus bled and suffered for my pardon, and He was raised to overthrow the grave. To this I hold, my sin has been defeated. Jesus now and ever is my plea. All the chains are released. I can sing. I am free, and not I, but through Christ in me. With every breath I long to follow. For He has said that He will bring me home. Come on. And day by day, I know He will renew me until I stand with joy before the throne. To this I owe, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I, but through. Yet not I, but through Christ in me. We praise you, Jesus. We praise you alone, for you are worthy. A thousand generations falling down in worship to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. And all who've gone before us, and all who will believe, will sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Oh, come on, church, you know it, your name. 'Cause your name is the highest. Your name stands above them all. Lift your voice, all thrones and dominions, all powers. And the angels
Well, good evening. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Dave Lewis. I'm one of the pastors on staff here, and I really want to welcome you on behalf of the speakers, myself, and those who have organized it, welcome you here to our speaker series this evening. While I'm talking, you can probably see this QR code behind me. Our care pastor, Lisette, has actually created this survey that she would like you guys just to take the time. It takes about a minute to fill out, from what I understand. If you would, while I'm kind of introducing the evening, just take the opportunity to scan the QR code, fill out the survey. The reason why she has created the survey is because we are starting various care initiatives in the future here. And so your feedback onto actually where we should start, what we should start with, is going to be helpful for her as she creates those going forward. So if you could take the time to do that. If you're joining us online, welcome. And you can also just scan this on your computer screen. And like I said, just fill it out while I'm introducing the evening. If you haven't been to a speaker series here before, I think this is our fourth one. There is purpose behind what we're doing, and I think the hope for all of us is that the reason why we have these is because there's certain topics that you really can't do justice to in a sermon on a Sunday morning. And so we want to take the opportunity in the speaker series to kind of dive a little deeper into some of the subjects that are often questions for us that, like I said, we just can't address on a Sunday morning sermon. And so if you go online to our YouTube channel, you can find the speaker series talks that we've done in the past. We've had one on hell. That was the last one we did. We did one on divine violence, and the first one we did was on the creation stories and what can we faithfully discern through those. Those live on our YouTube channel, so I'd invite you to go and take a look at those. But what you will find, if you look at them, and similar to tonight, you will find a divergence of views on the different questions that we're looking at. And I think at the end of the day, we want everybody to be aware of the different streams of thought that are out there when it comes to Christian scholarship. We also want you to know that we can be Christians and still hold different views on various topics. And I think I'm going to quote Pastor Sawyer here from the last one. The whole hope is that as we gain an understanding of other people's perspectives and where they're coming from, that it wouldn't push us away from one another, but it would actually pull us closer. I'll say if we leave here tonight without a deeper sense of love for one another, especially those who are struggling with their mental health, I think we would have failed tonight. And so our hope that as we look at this topic, like I said, that we can't do justice to it in a sermon, that a few things would happen. I think, first of all, that we would reduce the stigma that is around mental health. I know that there's a stigma in our culture, but there's also a stigma around mental health in the church. And, if you haven't heard it before, I want to tell you that it's okay to love Jesus and your therapist at the same time, all right? We know that sometimes, faith is a great help. And we trust in Jesus, for those things. We rest in His love and all of that. But sometimes we just need someone that who can walk beside us, help us process the things that we've experienced. So we hope that by the end of tonight that we will have reduced the stigma a little bit. I think the next thing is to just gain a greater awareness of the challenges around mental health in our society. We're going to be looking specifically at families and youth today. So I hope that you walk away with a greater understanding and awareness of the challenges that face both families and youth. And then I would say the last thing is that I'm really hoping that from tonight we will walk away with just some clear next steps that we can take to reach out to those that are struggling with mental health challenges with empathy that's rooted in the love of Jesus. And so this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'm just going to quickly introduce our speakers just by name, and then I'm going to pray and invite our first presenter to come up. But you're going to hear from Jorg, who is pastor and also in process on becoming a therapist. You're going to hear from Jennifer, who is a therapist as well and works a lot with families and all sorts of things. And she'll share a little bit more about what she does when she gets up here. And lastly, Marianne, who works with Youth Unlimited and is a therapist that works a lot with students. And so you're going to get varied perspectives. But before they come up, I'd just like to open us in a word of prayer. Father God, we're just so grateful to be able to have this conversation. Like I prayed before, you have, your word says actually in Psalm 139 that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are complex beings. And God, I thank you that as we learn more about who we are and how you've created us, that you have given people wisdom to help us navigate some of the challenges that come up with the complexity of who we are as humans. And so, Lord, we just pray tonight that we would come and enter into this conversation with open hearts and open minds, ready to receive the wisdom from those who are going to be presenting today. Father, I pray that all of us would walk away here with a sense of awe and wonder about who we are and how you've made us, but also that we'd walk out of here with some clear direction on how we can come alongside those with mental health challenges that are here in our midst. And Father, I pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. With that being said, I'm going to invite Jorg to come on up. Let's welcome him.
Thank you so much, Pastor Dave. Thank you, everybody that made it out here. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. I have a strange, weird name, so that gives it away. I'm from Germany. I came here now 10 years? I don't even know. Honey, how long have I been here? A bunch of years I've been here. I came here as a church planter. And for all those who know Pastor Sawyer, he was one of my first people to join this little church plant. He was in the core group. And so I pastored this church, and now I'm in this transitional period. I closed it up, handed that church over to my successor, went back to university to do my master's in clinical counseling at Tyndale, and I was saying I'm 12 hours away to finish my practicum. I'm very close. Thank you. Yeah. And I have the honor to talk a little bit about like how do we fit this together? This big topic of mental health, but also our faith as Christians. How does that work together? How do I make that work in my life? Because when we talk about this sometimes thing that we have a hard time grasping, a lot of the time what it is that it's personal. For me, it's personal. When I'm talking about this is not just an academic exercise. This is real. This is at times very heavy. And that's why I want to start and kind of like use this verse here. You can see it at the back as an umbrella, as something that guides us. And it says here, in Psalm 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So everything we're going to do, everything we're going to hear, keep that in mind. This is God, what God's intention is, his desire. He's close to those that are brokenhearted. I want to ask you this simple question. Who here has struggled themselves or knows someone who has struggled with their mental health? And if you feel comfortable, can you raise your hand? I think like 90%. Good for the 10%. I want to know your secret. More than anything, what that means is like this is not niche. This is close. And as I said, it's close for me. It was 4 years ago. I remember it was Easter Sunday. We had a beautiful Sunday service. I had just baptized 2 people. The church is growing. All the things that you hope and you pray for are happening, like what I wanted for so long. And I remember in our kitchen of the church, I just plopped to the ground. And I just felt empty. Bilbo Baggins in The Lord of the Rings, I love this quote. Bear with me if you don't like Lord of the Rings. He tries to explain his feelings. He says, I feel stretched, thin, like butter on too much bread. And that's kind of like how I felt. Something was going on, and it shouldn't have been like that, but it was. And I know something in me was breaking. I was very fortunate that I could go to my supervisors, and they said, like, take the time, go see experts. And I had to be off over half a year because I burned out. But I needed to answer this question for myself, like, how does this work together with my faith? And so tonight, I want to look at three things. I want to, very shortly, because I think we're going to hear a little bit about this later, define what are we talking about when we talk about mental health and mental illness. What does it mean from a Christian perspective? And then what can we do as a church? So here we have like a few definitions. The first one is from the World Health Organization, and they describe mental health as a state of well-being that enables people to cope with life stresses, realize their abilities, work productively, and contribute to their communities. So what I want us to notice is, like, mental health is not the absence of illness, but it includes like flourishing, resilience, relationship, purpose, functioning. And mental health, mental illness talks then more about the conditions that affect mood, thinking, emotions, behavior. And I think we know a lot of them, examples like depression, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, all of these things. What I want to take away from this is, like, all of this is on a spectrum. It's dynamic. Things change. There's ups and downs. We can have a mental illness and flourish. We are complex. We're not black and white. So with that in mind, how do we look at this from a Christian perspective? And I just want to give what has been helpful to me as I'm wrestling with my own experience, with my own emotions. And the first thing I always think about is the Imago Dei. We are made in the image of God. When we talk about theology, we want to start in the beginning. And it says, God created humans in his image. And that's very, very important, because it says something about you and me. And then the second part is, there is the fall, and something gets distorted. And that is a reality. There's brokenness in this world. We can see it everywhere. We can see it in ourselves. So there is these things that are working together, but we can never forget about how it started. Sin cannot take away that image. There is dignity in each of us that is given from God. And if it's given from the outside, nobody can take it away from us, not even ourselves. So let's have that in mind of like when we think about us and think about this complex being, we are made in the image of God. There's dignity, but there's also brokenness. But there's also a lot of stigma and misconception and these are just like, this is a short list. These are things that I've heard, that I've experienced as I was pastoring, when I'm now with clients. These are things that come up a lot of the times. Mental illness is caused by weak faith. Personal sin is the root cause of mental illness. Prayer alone will cure a person struggling with their mental health. Mental illness or disorders are demonic. You probably have heard some of these things. Maybe you've been taught these things. First of all, most of these are not new. I always remember the disciples coming up to Jesus when they interact with this blind man, and the first thought that they had is like going to Jesus like, who sinned? Was it his parents? Was it him? It was this thought, and so often it's still there in churches. It's like someone has sinned, and that's why. That's the cause. And Jesus hears this, he says, no. That's not it. That's not how this works. That's not how God works. Actually, what comes out of it is like God will glorify himself in this. And what does he do? He heals. He cares. He honors the dignity in this person. Someone with depression needs compassion, not condemnation. Someone with anxiety needs support, not shame. I think what happens sometimes is we get things mixed up about what the Bible tells us about the human being, a human person. We are holistic beings. We are one thing. Plato looked at the world differently. And I bring him up here. I'm not going to do like a deep philosophy session, but I think it's helpful because a lot of the times it has kind of like come into our theology, into understanding, is that there is kind of the separation of like there's the body and then there's the spirit. There's the body, and then there's the spirit, the mind, the thoughts, your emotions, and there's this separation. And a lot of the times in Platonism, it's like the body's bad, doesn't really matter, but the spirit is important because that will live on forever. So you don't care about that. And it's this duality. It's like the spirit, if something is off in your thinking, in your thoughts, in your emotions, it must be spiritual because it's separated from the body. If something is off with your body, we're okay. We go to the doctor. Yes, we want to pray, but like we're very happy to go to the doctor. It's fine. Get some medication. Get that operation. It's like yes, like I punched my brother once, and I broke my hand. It's basically the only fight I ever got into, and I lost. And you'll go to the doctor, you get a cast. Something is broken. But with your mind, a lot of people, it's like, no, we don't want that because that's separate. But that's not what the Bible talks about. As the Bible talks about as like that isn't separated. our spirit and our body belongs together. In its totality, it's created in the image of God. So when we talk about mental health, remember this foundation: you're one being. Your emotions, your wrestling with your thoughts are part of who you are, a part of the human experience. We are learning more and more how the body, there's a very famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. And it's like, yes, our experience doesn't stay just in our minds, but it's stored in our bodies, in our brains, but all over our bodies. There is a connection. We are one thing. And this struggle of emotions and thought is part of the human experience. And what I love is that the Bible is not shy about this. The Bible talks about these things. The Bible does not shy away from big emotions, from the wrestling. And I just put up 3 examples. There are many more. Jeremiah says, "Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow, to end my days in shame?" Psalm 88 is one of these Psalms of lament. This one sticks out because a lot of the times they start this person putting all their emotions in, and it ends with this hope of God redeeming, saving. Psalm 88 doesn't have any of that. It ends with, "You have taken from me friend and neighbor, darkness is my friend." This is in the Bible. God was okay with putting this stuff, these experiences, these prayers, these songs in there. We see it in Jesus. Jesus wept when his friend Lazarus died. Jesus wept. And he looked at Jerusalem. He had emotion. He felt the struggle. In Gethsemane, he was wrestling with what he had to do. He said, "God, Father, take this cup away." He is sweating blood. It says, I don't know about you, I haven't sweated blood. I was running like yesterday, it was quite hot, but that's profound. So we as Christians, we that try to follow the teachings of Jesus, that look at the Bible, we see these examples of the Bible that teaches us, like, it seems almost like God is close to the brokenhearted. We don't need to hide these things. We shouldn't have to hide these things, these thoughts, these emotions. So now what do we do? And I want to use these last minutes to talk a little bit about us as a church. What does this mean? How do we do this? How do we honor the Imago Dei in our friend and neighbor, the person sitting next to us in the pew, our co-workers, everywhere? Like, what's the response from us as a community of believers? I think what is essential is participation. We as a church are called to join with God. And what's God's work? I love how the theologian N.T. Wright says it. He says it, God's will set things right. He is at work to bring healing and restoration in this world. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And we're called as his followers to participate in that. I love that healing, or to heal in Greek. So if you look at the New Testament, they have different words for healing. But like some of them, when it's healing, it's therapoio, therapy. God does therapy with this world. That's what he wants for you, for me. That's what he calls us to be, like to be a community that joins into that. Paul talks about this in Romans 12. He says, weep with those who weep. That's participation. That's being there with the person that is struggling. I love the story of Job because it's so real. And I love his friends. They get a really bad rap. They mess it up later. I get that. But if you read that, what they do first is they sit with Job for 7 days. For 7 days, they're sitting there with him in his misery, to be there, caring for him in silence. Funny enough, it's the moment they start talking, things go downhill, which should be maybe a reminder for us. What people often need is not our talk, but our presence. To shed a tear when they shed a tear. To listen. My organization, when I had my burnout, I had to come, I went home for, home Germany. I stayed with my parents, and they had organized a kind of an assessment for me with a psychiatrist. And this psychiatrist, he had some experience. I was not the first missionary that he had sitting in front of him. And for an hour and a half, he just told me to tell me what happened. Tell me how you're doing. And I talked. I just talked. And after that, he looked at me, after I had listened, acknowledged. He said, Jorg, this makes sense. It makes sense that you feel this way. And it was so profound. It was not much, but so profound. This person, he could have, he had multiple PhDs. In Germany, there's a level over the PhD. Oh, yeah, Germany. Anyways. So he had that too. It's there's another level on top. It's even a bigger thesis that he had to do research. Anyways, but he could have given me 1,000,000 answers. And they were probably all correct, but what he said is that makes sense. I see you in your pain. What would it look like if we as a church or a community like that, as the bare minimum. As the bare minimum that are willing to sit with people. Because we see that they have dignity. Dignity in their wrestling, in their struggles. And listen. Make them feel safe. I hope and I pray that this is who we grow to be as a church. This church, any church. Because this is what we're called to be. Because it points to what is to come. And I want to close with this to remind us. When we do this, we join what God is already doing. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. Thank you so much.
Folks. Hi, folks. Oh, there it is. Hi, folks. Thank you, Jorg. The vulnerability and beauty of that. Thank you, brother. I'm Jennifer Bowen. I drove in from Hamilton. I thought it was going to make me 2.5 hours, but it took me an hour because I spent some money on the 407. I got to go quickly. I waved at 3 police cars for your benefit, and I'm glad I'm here in one piece. I am the executive director of a place called Shalem Mental Health Network. Shalem is the word shalom. It's actually the adjective. And shalom is probably familiar to you, the word for peace. It's the word for the rebuilding of the temple. And isn't that a great name when you think about us being put back together when we're feeling hurt from mental illness? We have a small office in Hamilton where we run a counseling practice. But we have grown since 1963 to have a national network. We have therapists across Canada, and we serve churches like yours where pastors need support, where congregation members need support, and pastors are saying, I can't keep up. So we've designed programs to support people like you. And I'll say it is deeply encouraging that people are coming on a Friday night to have this conversation. So thank you. Brave and healthy choice. I'm going to ask you a question that suspiciously will not sound like a mental illness question, but bear with me because I go off on tangents. So here we go. How many of you tonight, between now and last October, when they declared flu season, got a flu or a cold? Hands in the air. That's a decent amount. So I'm talking like good cold, like phlegm. Like, I have to go to the Shoppers Drug Mart to get more Kleenex. I'm blowing my nose so much I need the lotion Kleenex that's expensive because it hurts. Yeah? Okay. Now, thinking back to that cold, I want you to think about what the first symptom was. Was it a sore throat? Yes, for some. Headache for some? I had one where I was just tired for 3 days and needed to sleep and didn't know why, and then the fever started. So for your fever, when did you decide to have a fever? Therapists are known sometimes to ask tricky questions. So we don't decide to have a fever, do we? I remember having a moment a few years ago when we were talking about biology in my house and hearing one of my children talk about how, I don't know if you've heard this, our blood cells will bump into a germ and say, you're a virus, you don't belong here. You're a bacteria, you don't look good. And it will send a chemical through our bloodstream to our brain that says, we need a fever, we need to kill something. We don't know there's a virus. We don't know there's a virus. But our blood cells have discovered that. And our blood cells tell the brain, we need a fever. And the brain doesn't tell you, you're going to have a fever now. The brain says, you're cold, Jennifer. So Jennifer goes into the linen closet and gets the electric blanket and cooks for half an hour until my temperature goes up. my brain is taking care of me. Jorg did a beautiful job of talking about how God has designed us, and unlike Plato, that we are whole, God has made us mind and body and spirit. And I am dazzled at how God has built inside us ways to cope and ways to heal. And my suggestion, my proposal tonight is the family is one of God's gifts to us in coping with mental health. I'm going to do my best to prove that point to you. So thinking about that process, I want you to think about how strange it is that, again, God's kingdom, there are lots of different kinds of babies that are born. There are some babies, like a giraffe, have you guys seen a giraffe video online? No, when giraffes have babies, the babies fall 6 feet to the ground, and then within 5 minutes are walking around and eating a bush. Could you imagine how great life would be as a mom if that happened? Sorry. We could have been turtles. The last time I went on a family vacation, my parents dragged me to Florida, and my mom booked the vacation, unbeknownst to me, timed with a turtle egg births. Have you seen those? Turtles will swim in and lay their eggs on a beach, and they'll slowly hatch. The mom's gone, and the babies are born, have to crawl out of the sand and have to scurry like little fidget toys into the ocean. Most of them get eaten, unless you're in Florida in that particular neighborhood, and then there are tourists who will help keep you safe. So that was my job for 2 afternoons. That could have been us, but that's not how God designed our family. God designed us to be born into a community, to be born into a pod of people that say, you are precious. I have your back. I see you. That is God's design. Scientists thought for a long time, and when I talk about science, I think it's just the world paying attention to what God has built. The world has thought, if we speak a lot at babies, if babies hear Beethoven in the background, then they get smart. Have you heard that? Or if the more languages you throw at a baby, the more clever they become. The newest idea from Harvard is actually the more you throw a ball to a baby, the more times you look at a baby and they look back at you, the more times you hold a baby and they smile at you, the more time your 2-year-old grabs and holds your hand and you take an opportunity to talk about the bird that you just saw. Every encounter, the parents, the family, is growing a healthy brain. We're intrinsic to children being healthy. We know that this is the case because we see the opposite side of it. There was a tragic time, there's tragedy all over the place, but one tragic time in recent memory was when a regime fell at the end of the 80s. Oh gosh, I'm aging myself that I remember the 80s. In 1989, in Romania, a regime fell. And when that happened, and those of you who've taken Psychology 101 in university, you would have heard the story about how tens of thousands of children during this corrupt government were put into orphanages. And hundreds of babies died. And it was because there are rooms with rows and rows of cribs. And some children wouldn't see an adult all day. And we learned, you don't set up that kind of study, but you can observe tragedy when it happens, that babies need contact. The babies with cribs near the nurses' stations were mostly okay. It was the kids on the outskirts of the room. They were fed, they were changed, they had food. They weren't in the elements, but they didn't thrive. God has built us to love each other and to love each other into health. So God made families for a reason. I'm going to share a couple more stories about things that get me excited about how God has built families to make us resilient, and then I'm going to give you some tricks to try with your family that support mental health. First thing I'm going to say is I'm going to talk about a psychiatrist. His name is Murray Bowen. I said at the beginning, my name is Jennifer Bowen. When I do this talk sometimes with therapists, they gasp, because in my field, Murray Bowen is a very big deal. He developed family systems theory. If you've ever seen people draw sketches of families of this is a circle and this is a circle and these guys are, and that's Murray Bowen. I'm not related to him, although I wish I was. Before he became a psychiatrist. He was a surgeon in the Second World War. So he was sewing up soldiers after they'd been blown up, did that for a couple of years, and then was stationed as a physician taking care of the guys coming off the field. And he noticed something dramatic that we continue to see in war. The soldiers with close friends, with a pile of cards from mom, a pile of cards from wife, or from sister, or from dad, those soldiers didn't get PTSD. The soldiers who were alone, who were frightened, who hadn't built friendships around them, they were highly vulnerable to PTSD. That's profound. It's called shell shock back in the Second World War. We didn't have a language for PTSD yet. But he was noticing as a physician, we are not just individuals, we are meant to be a family. Health is about connection. It's not just about being one-on-one. I'll tell you something. When I was preparing today, I had the idea of giving you a proper Bowen metaphor of a mobile. I have one in my office. It's too big to bring, so I bought one for you. And last night, I tried to put it together. It may be crumpled on my kitchen counter. I may have had a temper tantrum when it didn't go, I may have been frustrated when it didn't get put together properly. I want you to think about a mobile. Sometimes we put them above cribs. Sometimes there might be a long rod and some balls over here hanging, and then maybe another rod and a couple balls over here, and then another rod with a couple balls. Can you guys imagine that? If I took one ball on the far side over here and I flung it, what would happen to this? Can you imagine that in your mind? When we think about families, we soothe each other, we feel each other's pain, we get activated. When you think about mental health and family, we support each other through it, but we also feel it when one of us experiences mental illness. Families feel pain. In thinking about how God uses us, kind of like God uses the hypothalamus and white blood cells to give us a fever, how God uses our family to help us stay well, I think about this model of flourishing. To flourish, you guys can call this out. What are like 5 or 6 things that we as humans need to flourish? Thank you. Love. If I had a pen, a gift, I'd throw it at you, and I don't. No chocolate bars, unfortunately. We need love. We need food and sleep. We need to take care of our body. We need healthy thoughts. We need spiritual food. We need prayer. We need meditation. We need meaning. Why am I in this world, God? What have you tasked me to do? But we specifically need relational tools to soothe what's going on when we're experiencing issues with our mental health. So I'm going to suggest 3 things to think about in terms of how your mental health, how you can help mental health in your family, whether it's yours or whether it's other family members. Number 1 is emotional presence. I want to think about maybe a 12-year-old who's struggling with homework, sitting at a table and not having a good day. What happens when a parent comes over and sits beside them? I'll give you some interesting statistics. That kid's mark usually goes up 10%, just if a parent sits beside them. But we all know that that child's nervous system will have calmed down. If I put electrodes on someone to test that kid, how are you feeling? And I had a parent come and sit beside them, a parent with a smile on their face, who was in a good mood, came and sat beside them, that child's blood pressure is going to come down. Their heart rate is going to change because someone loving is sitting beside them. There's a psychologist from Massachusetts called Ross Greene who talks about how we as parents in families become surrogate brains to our children. So when a child is struggling and they can't think their way through it, they need to borrow our brain. is this how you're feeling? You seem to be frustrated. Are you feeling frustrated? No, you're not feeling frustrated. Are you hungry? That kids sometimes can't think their way through it. Teenagers sometimes can't think their way through it. As families, we can be each other's surrogate brains. God designed us to co-regulate, which cares for our body and helps manage mental illness. We were talking earlier, Pastor Dave, I'm going to embarrass you for a second. We were having a conversation about loving teenagers in our family and about how hard it is when they're learning to drive. And this is a great opposite example. My 19-year-old finally got around to doing a driver's license, and I've been all spring, white-knuckling, sitting in the driver's seat, and twice my foot almost went through. I almost sprained my ankle because I was trying to press an imaginary brake that wasn't there. I don't know if any of you have been in that situation. That's an example where my anxiety went up, and poor Charlie's anxiety went up as well. However, when I apologized and we both sat down, we prayed, we relaxed, and as I calmed down, he was able to calm down too. We were able to correlate. Our nervous systems play off each other. We are not just individuals. Another piece, I'm going to show another, no, I won't. Yes, I will. There's another mechanism that God has built in our brains, and that is something called mirror neurons. And what that is if as I stand here on the edge of this, the stage platform, if I were to fall right now and you heard my knee hit the ground and crunch a little bit, do you know what would happen to you? Your brain would send a message from your eyes to your knee, back to your head to say, ouch. You would feel a little bit of my pain. Isn't that a magical, godly, divine, incredible gift that when a child is saying, Mom, I'm not okay, when a teenager is saying, Dad, I need to talk, I'm really struggling right now. I talked about physical pain. It's the same emotionally. We feel it when someone tells us. So in mental health and family, our relationships and connectedness with each other is our secret weapon. One more example of that, there was a psychiatrist called James Cone, I believe from Georgetown. Has anyone here been in an MRI machine before? Do you know what one looks like? Yeah. Do we love the MRI? No, it's miserable. MRI is the kind of thing that gives you a panic attack because it's very, very loud and it's a cone and you get into it and it screams. James had this brilliant idea of putting people into it and then telling them, we're going to put an electrode on your ankle, and when you see the X, we're going to zap you and it's going to hurt. I don't think people were paid for that experiment. Isn't that crazy? And his experiment was, what happens if we put a family member beside? Do bonds between people actually impact our welfare and our health? Yeah. So he had no one holding hands, and then to say 3, 2, 1, zap. How much did that hurt? That was about a 7. Okay, we're going to have a stranger come in and hold your hand. Ready? 3, 2, 1, zap. How was that? Oh, that was kind of an 8. Didn't like that. And then a loving partner coming in and holding hands. Anyone want to guess what that number was? Thank you. Anecdotally, the stories are, I don't think it's working. Can you try it? Try it again. I didn't feel that. Bonds have a profound impact on our brain. It doesn't make depression evaporate. It doesn't make anxiety evaporate when we have bipolar in the family or schizophrenia. These are heavy, heavy, heavy issues. But when asked to talk about, Jennifer, what should we know about mental health and family, is that God has designed to give us this amazing mechanism, this safe place where people that love us, who have our back, can help share our suffering and bring soothing in ways that we can't find anywhere else. So the number 1, emotional presence. Number 2, repair. Something that was fascinating to me, I don't know if I said this, but I became a therapist at Tyndale back in '99. And I've worked, I feel like, with everything under the sun at lots of different agencies, with Christians and with non-Christians, and addictions and violence and blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that surprised me most was hearing someone talk about what healthy relationships look like, because I grew up in a family, if you're healthy, you don't fight. Because godly families don't fight, right? Research says, actually, that it's okay to squabble. It's okay to say, I don't agree with you. It's okay to say, no, I'm on the same page. We got to figure that, no. Or when you make a mistake and you have a squabble, research says that's not what's important. What's important is, do you go back afterwards and say, shoot, that thing that happened last night, this is kind of what I was trying to do. What were you trying to say? This is what I was trying to say. So healthy couples have squabbles and they repair. Healthy families, when we make a mistake as a parent, I don't know if I'm the only person in the room that has spoken out of turn as a parent. 3 weeks ago, my son said, Mom, why are you sitting on the stairs all by yourself? Mommy's on the stairs because Mommy doesn't want to parent right now. Mommy, you don't want Mommy to parent right now. Yeah. We all make mistakes, but what is godly and what promotes mental health is coming back afterwards and saying, gosh, this is what I wish I had said. This is what I'm concerned about. What's going on for you? Let's try to figure this out together. So if you're thinking, Jennifer, what can we do as families? Think about repair. It's never too late to go back and say, let's loop back through that conversation and try again. And the last thing I'm going to say is that healthy families that promote really good mental health are ones that make space for rest. When I say rest, I'm not talking about like a spa weekend or necessarily vacations, although those can be lovely when we have the means for them. But rest meaning, let's just be still together. Let's not plan anything on a Saturday and sit near each other and be near each other and see what comes up. Because when we're still, you start to notice how folks are doing. Healthy families will make space for those conversations. I'm sure that my colleague Marianne, you might say when you come up here, that driving in the car with teenagers is brilliant because the conversations start to happen. That's an example of just a moment of rest. There's no screens. And being quiet with each other, those issues can float to the top and we can talk about them. Am I okay as part of this family right now? Are you okay? Should we talk about what's going on? I also had a thought that during the series, as I'm talking, you may have stories, thoughts about your family, about mental illness as it's threaded through your family. 100% of us know someone who's struggling with mental illness, whether it's us or someone we love. And you were saying 90%, CMHA says 100. We'll just say CMH is right. And it's fair. Yeah. If you need someone to tell you that it's okay to get help, you can say Jennifer sent you. Jennifer Bowen was speaking, and she said, I'm having a hard time with that if you're having a hard time with your mental health, if you're concerned about a family member and you don't know what to do, if as those questions float to the surface, you're not sure how to respond, there are people who would love to help you. That is their calling, and that has God has gifted them. You're not a burden to anyone. You're not failing anyone by asking those questions. If anything, I would say it is courageous, and you're moving to a next level up in how living life well and vibrantly. The last thing I'm going to say is that the church has a special role in the life of the individual and the family when it comes to mental health. I want you to think about a family that might come to Bayview Glen. I don't know any of you here, so this is just a mock-up. A 17-year-old has had so much anxiety that they've missed most of the school year and they might not graduate. And mom and dad are beside themselves with stress. It's taken a toll on their marriage. One of them is even thinking, should we throw in the towel? Devastating. In that family, one person's anxiety has impacted everybody in the family. That's not bad. God has built us to feel each other's pain. Thinking about that family, where in our society is it okay for that person to go? Where in our community can a whole family show up as themselves? Show up and say, I'm not okay. You could call Shalem. Counseling offices would work with you. But I would say counseling offices are only 1 hour a week. We need community. And I think that when you look at the wider society and all of the organizations that we have, whether it's workplace or teams and sports or clubs, the church is uniquely positioned to be a place to say, we make space for pain here. We make space to talk about what's real. An honest community that, but part of following Jesus is being human. And part of being human, sometimes our pancreas conks out and we get diabetes. Sometimes we are born with genes that give us breast cancer when we turn 40. And for some of us, we're born with a brain that's predisposed to anxiety or to depression or to schizophrenia. And there's treatment. But the treatment thrives when people are surrounded by love. And the body of Christ is great at that. Thanks, folks.
Oh, I love high fives. Hi, everybody. I agree. Thanks for coming out on a Friday night. It's good to see you all. I get to talk about teenagers. I don't know why. They're like my favorite people in the world. Well, I know why. Actually, the Lord gave that gift to me. So really quickly, I work for Youth Unlimited. I've been there for 28 years. I started out doing child and youth work in a couple high schools, and I think part of it was as youth workers, you get to just have a lot of fun, and I like fun a lot. So I did that for a long time in schools, and then I kept having conversations with teenagers, and I'd say, oh, you should see a therapist. And they'd say, oh, you're my therapist. And I'm like, nope, I'm not. So I went back to school in 2012, graduated with my Master's of Clinical Counseling as well from Tyndale. And so now I'm a registered psychotherapist. That story is long too, but long story short, I have a practice in Newmarket where I see basically the general public, whoever that is, and then any youth in our programs at Youth Unlimited, I will see under that umbrella. So I wanted to start tonight actually by just saying how much I love teenagers, like I said, and the positive parts of them, because we're talking about mental health and all the things that, the struggles that go on, particularly now in this day and age. But they are also, when I started in youth ministry, I was younger, obviously, and I thought I was going to give all this wisdom and save people. And what I realized over time is I learned so much from the teenagers that I got to work with. And it has been such a gift on so many levels because they are energetic. They're pretty much up for anything. They are intuitive, and they are courageous, and they're strong leaders, and they fight for the unjust. So when you get to be a part of this community, you just learn and grow. And so I've learned as much from them as, well, maybe they haven't learned anything, I don't know, but that is why I love teenagers. And why I say that is as I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking we're talking about heavy stuff, and mine is a lot of heavy stuff. But I wanted to say for those of you in this room, the statistics or surveys show that 1/3 of our teenagers would describe their mental health as they're doing well or thriving. And so someone else mentioned it can have waves of heartache or difficulties, but for the most part, there is a whole population of teenagers who are thriving and young people who are thriving. Yeah? You know what, there was, thanks for asking that. We will do questions later, but I would say yes, actually, there was a whole group of teenagers that were thriving during COVID. They figured out how to connect with their friends. They figured out how to pay attention to each other. So yes, I would actually say, that being said, and we will get talking about some of the difficult parts of the statistics of what we're dealing with post-pandemic. And that being said, I also want to give a brief warning that I am going to talk about briefly a couple hard topics. So if you have to leave, if some of it's really hard to listen to, I totally get it. Take care of what you need to take care of, and someone can come talk to you if you need to. But I just wanted to put that out there as well. So all that to say, according to the Ontario Ministry of Children's Community and Social Services, they would say that approximately 1 in 5 children and youth in Ontario have mental health challenges. And about 70% of those cases have the onset in either early childhood or in their teen years. But identification and working with those young people is crucial because they can actually work through a lot of the issues and concerns that are going on if they get help appropriately. When they're ignored or we pretend that it doesn't happen or they're doing okay, then it can actually lead to more severe problems as they get older into adulthood. Someone recently was telling me, a good friend of mine was doing a talk, and he made such a really great point, and I want to share this. He was saying that one of the things that we can be doing for the youth in our communities and the people that we know is every time you drive by a school or a place where there might be youth, either children or teenagers or universities, that you pray for the universities or those schools, for the teachers, for the kids that are in there. Because we do know that there's a lot of people struggling, a lot of young people struggling. And I just thought that was such a great reminder. So I'm going to now go through some stats. They're hard, some of them, but they're stats that come from a report done by, it's called the Mental Health and Wellbeing Summary, done by CAMH, and it's a 2023 report, so after COVID. Here are there's 8 I'd like to talk about briefly. So number 1, there's been an increase in anxiety and depression. 38% of Ontario students rate that their mental health is either fair or poor. And so we're talking social anxiety, generalized anxiety, separation anxiety, those types of things. And of course there's more, but in my case, what I see on a regular basis is anxiety is one of the first things that show up. I would describe it personally as an epidemic. Lots and lots of students, as Jennifer mentioned, the 17-year-old that doesn't want to go to school, that's certainly not uncommon. And it's a challenge, as Jennifer mentioned, it's a challenge not only for the student, but also for the family. And how do you help them? Number 2 is increased concern surrounding global concerns. So war, climate change, the pandemic. Just under half, so 45% of students report feeling depressed about the future because of the climate change. And because our world is so accessible, so much can be seen online. And some of it is terrible. But on top of that, you also think about all the news that would include housing problems or potential jobs. And so then there's this like hopelessness almost of what's our future going to look like? What's the point? The lack of motivation, etc. So the third one would be the insecurity in body image. So over half, 56% of students are preoccupied with their weight. So they'll report sometimes, often, or always worrying about their shape, their weight, or their muscles. And during the pandemic, eating disorders skyrocketed. Jennifer was saying that at the McMaster Hospital in Hamilton was a 96% increase in eating disorders. Is that correct? Yeah. So, and that has, I think, leveled out a little bit, but at the same time, we're dealing, again, with a tremendous amount of young people that are dealing with body image issues. And many times, I think we think of females that that's the primary issue or concern, but males are also struggling with it. Particularly, I would say a big part of that would be what they see online, because it's about having the six-pack and being strong and muscular, and so that's a very prevalent situation as well. The fourth one is interesting because it speaks actually to what's come out of COVID. So in early winter, I did a talk at a primary school down in Toronto, and there was some parents in that seminar as well as the principal. And I showed them all these different things of what has happened post-pandemic, and this one was the one that stood out to him. He said, it's immaturity in social, emotional, and executive functioning, which basically means that when you think about some of the kids that would have been in COVID during like kindergarten, grade 1, obviously that's 5 years, actually it's 6 years ago, I guess. They are grade 6 now, grade 7, and there's many individuals or students that struggle with connection, or how do they teach each other, engagement, that sort of thing. Which brings me back again to Jennifer. I'm just going to keep referring to Jennifer because it's so true. Often we learn how to interact and communicate within our family settings, but if the family is busy or people are rushing and there's so much time spent elsewhere, how do we learn how to interact and communicate? Or there's families working because they have to both families, husband, wife, family members, single parents, everybody's working. It's very difficult to have that interaction time. So that was interesting because it's impacting our kids as well. The next two are disturbing, but I think really important to talk about. The first one is deliberate self-injury, and that would be 1 in 5 Ontario students report harming themselves on purpose in the past year. And so why I say that is, number one, it's extremely prevalent among our youth, and becoming younger, actually, as I listen to other therapists and just individuals talking. And why I think it's important as a community for the church to understand that, but also for parents and people that have youth in their lives, is how do we respond to that? And I think one thing that we tend to do when we don't know what's happening and all of a sudden you see marks or something like that, parents or loving individuals will be shocked, and the response will be like, that's disgusting, or what are you doing? And the reality about self-harm is there's so much shame attached to it already. We need to just be, of course, it's shocking, and so, yes, of course, but just to respond, and number one, how are you? What's happening? Like, are you taking care of this wound? How can we support you? What do we need to help you with this? And not in a panicky way, but just recognizing, as was said by both my counterparts here, is the reality of being seen for what's actually going on. So just an encouragement in that area. And then the second, or the 6th point, is suicidal ideations. 1 in 6 Ontario students report serious thoughts of suicide in the past year. So again, this is 2023 stats, but I would say from my experience, and even in the last few weeks, the tragedy of what's going on, unfortunately, I think more often than we would like, but there's more conversations. There's so many young people talking about suicidal ideations, and then in this case, they're serious. And why I say this is so important to talk about, again, in our faith communities, in our families, when this conversation or comes up, or we notice things, we can't say something that's going to make them all of a sudden decide to do something. In fact, to say something and ask, do you have a plan? Let's talk about this, is crucial to help them get help. And if there is a plan, we need to get that individual to the hospital so that they can get support that's needed immediately. Loneliness. Jennifer, I was taking notes just beside her. As she was writing, I was taking notes, but roughly 1 in 7 students report feeling lonely often or always. So Jennifer had said that health is about connection, and it's so true. And I think I was one of those kids that literally left sometime in the day, said goodbye to my mom and dad, and then I was gone, and they didn't have a clue where we were. Sometimes we were in the creek, I don't know, we were at, who knows where we were, but we weren't at home. And so then when dinner came, of course, we wanted to be fed, so we'd show up. Now, it's I don't know about what it's like for you, but it's very rare that we see kids playing street hockey, or we have a basketball court by our house, so sometimes we'll see kids playing basketball, teens, etc. But far fewer individuals are going out. Far fewer high school students, university students are going to parties. It's just, there's a lessening of that kind of community. And so there's more and more time spent, and I hear parents say this as well, that there's more and more time spent indoors, either in closed doors of their bedrooms or basements, or and sometimes there's a community online, but often there's not. And so again, this stat is very significant, and I'm going to speak to the church and just the prevalence and significance of that in a second. And the last stat is identity. So adolescence, if we talk about adolescent development, and even childhood development, we could spend so long just talking about that, but it's hard to be a teenager these days. That is just the truth for any of them. However, it's also such a significant time in their life where they have to figure out who they are. And so you're talking like, say, grade 6, so early teens, they'll be the ones that, and it can go a little bit longer to grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, where you'll have your son or daughter come home and they're like so loving and kind and you love them and you want to squish them. And then the next day they're telling you off and they're slamming the doors and telling you you're the worst parent in the world. And that back and forth is actually their way of having safety at home so that they can plant themselves and then they can go out and figure out stuff. And we see it, and it's not tolerable to be mean to your parents, but it actually is such an important part of their development. If you add to that, as far as identity goes, so that's happening for just our young people in general and children, but then you add to that something that's noteworthy is the youth or adolescents that are struggling in the LGBTQ plus community. They are among the highest risk groups for mental health challenges, and research consistently shows that they experience higher rates of psychological distress, self-harm, suicidal thoughts than their heterosexual peers. But the strongest protective factors are supportive families and school environments. So again, difficult, but really important to be having conversations. What does that look like? Wrestling it through as families, as church communities, so that they can have a place to land. So that's I'm like, oh, this is so depressing, but that's a snapshot of what's going on and some of the things that I work with in my office. But what do we do about it? And I think first and foremost, and what I've heard actually from youth over and over is, this feels so hopeless. And I get all like worked up because I'm like, the first thing that we need to do is offer hope. And now I'm like just ready to like, we need to remind ourselves and the youth in our lives that God is on the throne. This is not a surprise to him. It's hard, it's brutal to watch our kids struggle. There's so many things going on, but there is hope. And for many of our youth, especially when they get help early and there's a supportive group around them or people between medication and therapy, and there is such people can have great lives moving forward. It doesn't have to be so hopeless and dark. And so that's the first and foremost. The second part is what I've noticed over the years is our culture has become diagnosis, what's the word? Pardon? Yes, thank you. Are you a doctor? Which I love. I think it's so important because we want to know what we're dealing with, but I've heard so many young people either come in and they'll self-diagnose because they'll go online and say, I remember one young woman, she's like, I think she told me 5 things. And I was like, oh, how do you know that? Well, I just went online. I'm like, okay. So that's not uncommon, but I've heard parents say, well, we just need a diagnosis, but what happens often, and again, please hear me, I'm not against diagnosis and I'm not against medication. I think actually they're super important and valuable. But what can happen is that becomes the label of that individual. I'm depression, I'm anxiety, I'm bipolar, whatever it is. And we want to always be saying, you struggle with that, that's true, and it's complicated and there's so many parts. But again, you are actually first and foremost a child of God. That's period, and everything else we have to figure out, for sure. But it's living through I can't do that because of this, or I'm stuck in this. So we just want to change the language a little bit, because the problem is the problem, the person is not the problem. I want to talk again about what both Jorg and Jennifer talked about with regards to a family with a 17-year-old coming and struggling, and the place of a village in a church community. And I always, and when I do a talk like this, I talk about, okay, so if you were going to show up to work, if you were going to call into work, would you rather say that you broke your leg or you are stuck at the hospital because you tried to take your life? Or you cut yourself and I have to stay at the hospital to get stitches? Like, if we're all honest, we would all say, for the most part, that we would probably rather say we broke our leg. And then we might even get casseroles and, we'd walk with that person. But when we struggle with mental health, especially as a family, thank you. When we struggle with mental health as a family, we go insular. And I won't get into it, but in my own family, we had this situation, and my husband and I had to consciously choose to reach out to our village and say, we cannot do this alone. And our friends, like this little community came around us and they walked with us, they checked in, they prayed, we shared the updates for a while. It would be the same thing if we had a son or a daughter that had cancer. And this is what the church can offer. Be a place where we don't judge or say, oh, you can't come to church, I'm sorry. No, can I come and sit with you and we'll watch church together? Or what can I do to help you? Like, all those things just matter so, so much. There's another statistic that says that 28% of students report not knowing where to turn to when they wanted to talk to someone about mental health. And this is why I love youth ministry. Because youth ministry in churches, or for Youth Unlimited, where we do after-school programs and various programs with youth, when you have a caring adult, and that goes across the board, I'm not even talking just faith adults, but when we have a caring adult in our lives, or the lives of our children, then they know that they're seen and they're heard and they're known. I know youth workers that go to games and they show up in places that sometimes parents can't. They're working or they've got other things going on. And we have a program in the West End where one of our youth workers, I think 200 kids come and play soccer. It's amazing. And they love it. It's amazing. And so youth ministry, like this quote, often youth workers are the one that hear the first thing, like that an individual is struggling, and then they become the advocate to the parents, or they become the advocate in whatever space that is possible. So, I do want to end also with 6 things that I've learned from my teen clients. Some of them are young, so I work technically from 12 to 30-ish, but what I've heard is mostly the younger or middle teens. Number 1, not every conversation has to be a teachable moment. We talked about driving in the cars, and the reality is just about connection. It's not that we have to tell them something. We have this moment, and I've done this with I have 3 daughters, by the way, and they're like, Mom, you're teaching me, stop. So they don't talk like that. I don't know what the accent was, but when our kids are younger, our job is to teach and to tell. As they get into early adolescence or even late, grade 5 or 6, it becomes more about learning to listen and asking curiosity questions and guiding and directing, and not constantly okay, what about this? What about this? By the way, these literally are from clients that I've had over the years. Number 2, all the kids that I've ever met, teenagers, backing all the way back from when I started in youth ministry to now, I've never met a young person or a child that doesn't want a deeper connection with their parent. And I loved the example that was used about the MRI machine with Jennifer. Our families, we know that is not always the case, that some families are really difficult. There's things going on in families that don't allow for that. However, I'm assuming that if you're here, you want to know more about this. When often they'll start to shut down, and I can hear them in the office, and they're like, I don't know how to connect with my parents. I don't know what to say. And so it's, as parents, either asking them or just saying, how do we do this better? How can I walk with you to help you understand, or for me to understand you more? Because it's actually not their job to figure out what we need it's not their job to make it better for us. We have to help them understand it for us. Because when they don't get it, or we don't get it as parents, they start to feel a lot of shame. They don't want to disappoint their parents, and so then they just are quiet because they start to feel like all they're doing is disappointing, or that there's shame connected to it. If your son or daughter asks you not to tell other people something that they've told you, don't. And I'm not talking about suicidal ideations or abuse or anything like that with youth work, etc. I'm talking about the stuff where parents hear a story and then they'll tell their friend and then they tell another, and then it comes back to the student. I've heard this, and then the conversations are over. So if they're telling you something, either you can say, well, I need to talk this through with so-and-so, but if they're asking you to keep it private, then keep it private. The fourth one is take their conversation seriously by listening non-judgmentally and empathetically, creating space for them to talk, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Don't judge them or criticize or minimize how they're feeling. Sometimes you'll have again, I have 3 girls. A girl, no, sorry, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry, daughters. They'll be super emotional. Okay, that's true. And you're just like, what is happening? And then you start to kind of joke or whatever, and they're like, no, this isn't funny. So taking it seriously, asking more questions, allowing them to have space to talk. The fifth one is about repair. Be willing to say you're sorry or that you were wrong. Teaching connection. It shows that I care, I see you, I'm sorry that I messed up, I was really angry, I needed space. Jennifer covered it, I'll keep moving on. The last one is being aware of our own anxieties or concerns. I have heard this so many times where maybe it's someone in your family who had mental illness or struggles, and so you're so terrified that your child's going to have that, and say maybe a symptom shows up, and then you jump on it. What we're doing is actually, and Jennifer mentioned this too, this thing that's happening over here, our anxiety takes over, we try to fix it, and they catch our anxiety. Instead of just saying, they have to figure this out, how do I enter into this? And if it's a big deal, we'll figure this out as a family or with doctors, etc. But we have to allow our kids to have space to not be okay. And that if we're not okay, we figure it out over here. It's not their job to be okay so that we're okay. And on that note, thank you. You want a high five?
We'll do it. All right. Thank you guys so much for your presentations and words of wisdom, practical advice. We're going to take let's say we'll take a 6-minute break. All right. So you can go stretch your legs, use the washroom if you want. But what's going to pop up behind me is a QR code, and that QR code is going to take you to a page where you can actually ask questions to our presenters. And so if you can do that, if you need to go to the washroom or whatever, make sure you do this before. And then when you come back at 8:30, we will have a discussion with all 3 up here that kind of respond to the questions that you have about things that you've heard tonight, or maybe there's a burning question that you haven't heard anything about that you would like to ask. I would encourage you to write those into the survey as well. All right, so we'll give you time to do that. Stretch your legs, and then we'll all be back here at 8:30 to keep going. Thank you.
sing these words out, the Beatitudes, let these words be sung over you. Let it be to the Lord as well a reminder to seek His kingdom first. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek,
Check, check. There we go. Yeah, if you guys want to come on in and take your seats, and we're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions to our presenters here. And so I know one of the things that we hear about our speaker series, and we wish we could change it, because we always wish we had more time and could give the experts in the room more time. If there was one thing from that you maybe didn't get to really flesh out, during your talk, or one thing that you didn't get to say just because of time, what would that you would think would be important for us to know? What would that be?
I'm trying to just do one thing. Natural revelation. Jennifer touched on that a little bit. I think, and this is where I feel like what we learn from psychology is not going against our faith. I think natural revelation and if we study the world, if we study us, we learn about how God made things. And we learn to understand each other. And I think that is how God shows us things. And we can learn from psychology. And in all things, we can be skeptical. We can check things. We do want to do that. But I think there's so much to learn. I think the Bible is so beautiful. It's not a science book. That's not what it's meant to be. And God wants to show us so much more. And there's so much more to learn when we look and when we study.
Yeah. Okay. So looking kind of like what you were saying about how science is just observing the things that God's been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. Yeah. How about you, Marianne?
I think it would be that, particularly with our kids and young adults and children, it's such a process, and it being prepared to walk with this potentially for a long time, always keeping them or lifting them up to the Lord. Because I'm just constantly reminded that, the whole thing of putting on the weapons of God, that our fight is not against this world, it's against the principalities of the dark world. And realistically, there's so much confusion and so much parts in our culture that is meant to kill and destroy. I think that often of how Satan wants to kill and destroy our kids. And so in the midst of it, that God is on the throne, and if we are willing to walk with them, it can be a long time, and again, to be like, Lord, in your timing, that we will rejoice.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Jennifer?
I like listening to these two. The part that jumped out for me when I sat down was, oh shoot, I didn't do that chunk on caregivers. That I feel like when we're talking about mental health, we think mental illness stories come to mind. And I'm sure in this room, you all have pictures of people who you know who are struggling with mental illness. And some of you may be in the role of caregiver. And we think about how, I don't know if you know this, caregivers have a shorter lifespan than the people they are caring for. It is catastrophic, the impact on us if we don't take care of ourselves when we are caring for someone who is struggling. Thinking families come in all shapes and sizes. So some caregivers are older and some of them are younger, caring for parents who are seniors who are struggling with depression, and so many different faces for these issues. But caregiver self-care, taking care of this beautiful machine that God has made by eating and going to the doctor ourselves and taking care, getting enough sleep, that becomes so essential. And one of my favorite slides that I like to show sometimes talks about how the bigger our stress, the bigger the load of care that we have, the more the self-care. That curve needs to match. And I think that's why some people were struggling in COVID, because most of us were kind of trucking along in 2019, thinking, yay, 2020, it's going to be a great year. And then April that year, the strategies that we had to cope suddenly were not adequate anymore. And we all needed to take a step up. And so a lot of us were like doing aerobics in the living room and doing weird things to try to, and like baking. Did anyone start baking? Like, I know it's self-care, right? It's weird, but we were adding these moments of pleasure and joy, which is part of self-care, filling our cup. God using the beautiful things around us to fill our cup so that we can then pour out. Self-care has to be proportionate. And it's a big part of mental illness in the family.
No, that's good. Just speaking of, the caregivers, and that there was a question that came in just from somebody who has a adult sibling with bipolar. And so it's hard to know how to support them. They feel like they've kind of, in some ways, gotten lost in the disease. What would you say to somebody who, comes into, would ask you just for advice on how to walk with those in their families who have bipolar disorder?
Who wants to take a swing?
You full therapists.
How about I try and then
Yeah,
you
sure. Yeah, we'll work together.
Yeah.
We just don't want to overstep each other. Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bipolar hurts. It really can hurt. What came to mind first, if this person were in front of me and we were sharing a cup of tea and I were listening, I would say, I am so sorry. And I would say, brother, sister, you are running a long marathon. And the hard part is you don't know which version of your sibling you're going to see next time, and it's not going away anytime soon. So I would have conversations about things like grief. I grieve the sibling that I wish I had, who was well. I grieve the Christmases I wish were easy. I would talk about grief, and I would talk about how can I change my expectations for this relationship, for what version of the relationship they can have with me, lower my expectations so that I can stay fast, so I can run this race with them, and so I can love them in that way long term. Because it's a hard one.
Yeah, so just if I'm hearing you right, Jennifer, you can correct me if I haven't. So with this person, it would be actually important for them to find a therapist who could help them process the things like the grief that
Not
you're
a bad
discussing.
idea. Yeah, and if they need permission from someone, the executive director from Shalem said it's totally okay. That is your therapist will nod and say, "Good on you for coming. It's a hard one."
And this is part of that self-care
Yeah,
piece that
part
you
of
were
the
talking
self-care.
about.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like to think about self-care like a tune-up. We sometimes think my life has to be falling apart. My marriage has to be almost over. I need to be thinking about getting a lawyer to go to couple counseling, or I need to be falling apart before getting counseling. And that's statistically what happens. Right. However, we get better so much faster when you think of it preventatively. So thinking of it like an oil change rather than changing your transmission.
Right.
Like, think about every few years, how am I coping? If I'm not coping, one or two conversations and you might be off to the races.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne, how about you?
I just want to hang out with you.
This always happens with our speakers. It always happens. They become
too,
friends.
But that was such a good sorry. I love that. It's true, the grief of it, especially as a sibling. And this is one of those mental illnesses that has just such a long duration. I think I would talk about something called differentiation of self, though, like the idea that I'm not responsible for my sibling. Maybe that wasn't in the family system, but if there's any part of that, if you have a sick individual, sometimes that role in the family sort of takes a lot of energy from everyone else. And so giving yourself permission to say, I'm not responsible for what happens, grieving the loss of that relationship for sure, but what does it look like to be able to, in some ways, almost have an arm's length of emotion with regards to like what's going to show up? And then encouraging regular visits to the doctor, et cetera, because there is, I know a few people that have bipolar and their medication works really well. So just even advocating if that is something that you can do. But again, it's not your responsibility. So
Yeah, that's true. Some people flourish with mental illness because they are getting treated and they are well and they are having mental illness does not mean that life is over in any way.
No.
So, yeah.
Good. Thank you. Here's another one, just around, we talked about self-care, rest, those types of things. So Scripture tells us to rest in Jesus, but an ADHD, or anxious brain, physically doesn't know how to stop spinning. So how do we practically find rest when our biology keeps us on high alert?
I can say something about it even from a theological perspective. Rest looks very different for different people. What gives you life? What fills you? Like, what fills your cup? God knew from the beginning this thing needs juice. And somehow, from the very beginning, he's like, I'm going to model this to you. This is important. Find ways to do this. And it can, it looks different. Not everybody is like, I can just sit down and think about nothing for an hour. And I'm going to tell this, the younger generation, we've fully forgotten how to do that. But we can find, and I think that is, if I had a client sitting in front of me, I would say, it's like, let's find ways how to fill your cup. What works for you? And it's going to be part of you to look at it, it's like, yeah, what gives me life? What aligns with who I want to be? What are the connections? And part of that is, honestly, sometimes that means I need a brunch date with my friend, or I need to sit and watch a game, and we just gab. It could be so many things.
That's good.
For me, it's fishing. Thank you. Yes.
You found a friend.
Yes.
Next time. All right.
But I also know that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not. But it's no. Find your what does rest mean? How can God fill you in these moments?
Right. No, it's good. And anything to add?
I love that it's, God, Paul says, don't worry. And I think, come on. If you've got an anxiety disorder, that is one of the most unhelpful things to read from Paul.
Right.
He and I will have a conversation someday in heaven. So yes, when we say rest, it's true, we look at that at face value and think, shoot, I can't do that well, so I should panic. But I think it is about filling our cup. I think it is. And the people that I know, I have a close friend who will pick up a guitar and just do this and not really play anything, but that helps their brain just kind of go offline a little bit. But they need stimulus to do it.
Right.
Yes, and I've got another friend who draws the same way. They'll just doodle, and that doodling is rest because their brain is kind of in a different headspace. But neurotypical, neurodivergent brains are different, and we're just at the beginning, I think, of fully understanding all of this. I think in the next 20 years, we're going to have much clearer maps of what health looks like and how we can fuel differently and how we can heal differently. Yeah.
That's good.
And going back to the Magideo, I always say it wrong, but that we are such various parts. So we have the spiritual side, the emotional side, and I think, again, the understanding of our nervous system is becoming such a big thing now too, right? And so you're talking, the question seemed like it was two parts, potentially the neurodivergent, but also anxious. And so I would ask about that, if it's an anxiety and you can't calm your body down, what's happened and how do we help you calm down, just your whole nervous system? So those would be questions too.
Yeah. No, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, this one's a big one, and I know we don't have time to do a deep dive into this. So, but Jennifer, you mentioned the LGBTQ plus community in that, or sorry, Marianne, you did, with the rates of suicide and things like that. And, I know obviously, it's not a thing that happens outside the church. This population of people exist inside our church.
Course, yeah.
And so this question is, how would you, or what suggestions might you make to a parent who is walking with a child who wants to change their gender?
So to Jennifer's point earlier, I think I just want to address, many parents I've spoken to is, first of all, also addressing the grief of just like what you expected and what is maybe turning out is different. And I just think allowing space for the parent to grieve that, because it's hard. It's just hard. Regardless of where you land on this, it's just a really, really, really hard topic. And then I've really worked and tried to really understand this, and I think what I've determined after all these years of working with teenagers is coming to a place in understanding that as parents, number one, we actually, at some point, and very quickly, lose the ability to decide always what our kids are going to do. And I can think of countless things that teenagers do and we don't want them to, but understanding that I have to walk with, or parents have to walk with that situation and navigate that accordingly. And I know, I think back when I was maybe a teenager and, if someone would get pregnant and parents would kick them out. And so now and some parents would still, not trying to start an argument, but the whole point is coming to the place of like, either you're going to choose to walk with your child regardless of what's happening in the situation and grieve and walk and be honest and have relationship, but also have relationship, or you're not. And at some point, then that individual, that child, may choose to continue on, maybe to transition or to live a lifestyle that you don't approve of. But at some point, you're making a choice to really be in relationship or not. And again, it's not an easy conversation. I wish, actually, as a faith community, we would be able to just have those conversations in a really more honest, authentic, and really heartbreaking way, because it's such a challenging thing. And then I always go back to, we have to really, truly, God made this individual, the child. And yes, it's heartbreaking on so many levels for parents, but he still sees, he still knows what's happening. And so trusting that whatever God has in store, that he's in the midst of that. And we may not know until eternity, but yeah. So I don't know if I answered that question. Was that clear enough?
What I hear is that it's important to walk with them through what they're experiencing. Because, at the end of the day, as God, that person still bears God's image, and God loves them through this situation. If we're going to be, if we're going to have these relationships with our kids, that that we have to do that hard step of walking with them.
Well, and I think when we're choosing to step away from the relationship altogether, I think our hope is that they're going to want to follow, or that it will change, but the reality is, I think often they'll find community that will either support that or help them transition or whatever that is, or like I said in my statistics, or worse, that the suicide will maybe become an option, or that sort of a damaged lifestyle, or you gave that example earlier, but yeah. And so I do think you're choosing if you're going to have a relationship or not, and it's just not an easy decision. And I'm not comparing, to be sure. I know they're all individual topics, but I think of parents that have kids who are addicts or living on the street, and it's the same sort of thing. You're choosing, what are you choosing, right? So it's such a complicated question.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer, Jorg, you guys have things to add?
A couple of things I'm going to say. One is, there's so much pain around this. There's so much pain in the person struggling in their body, trying to figure out gender. That is a hard walk. And there's so much pain in the parent wanting to protect them from pain and difficulty and wanting to. So I want to say, this is a hard one. And this is, I've walked many parents through these processes and these conversations, and I've walked people who have been struggling with gender. It's a long, gentle process. So I don't want this brief conversation to discourage people. I would say there are loving brothers and sisters in Christ who will offer support, because it's a special kind of grief. I'll also say that one of the things you said earlier, Jorg, about, I forget what language you used, something that I find a bit confusing and delightful. And one of the things I'm going to ask Jesus about when I get to heaven, C.S. Lewis talks about natural law and how if something thrives and is beautiful, it's clearly godly. And it's confusing when you see people, you're born and we grow into churches to say this is God made Adam and Eve, that whole narrative. It's confusing. But I have met people who are really thrived, and I kind of like, we're living in a time of mystery where we don't understand. And when we don't understand, my default in my deal with God is I lean toward love, because I think that's what we're called to do. But I can appreciate that it's so confusing for families. So don't be alone in the confusion. Reach out to get support would be what I would say.
Yeah.
There's pain on both sides. When a child usually doesn't make this decision lightly. These are not thoughts that are just coming up on a whim. So again, I think as a parent, as a friend, as a family member, whatever it is, as the church, be there in the pain. Just like if you don't know what to do, that's okay too. But then just be there. Again, that's relationship. Again, that's connection. Don't throw that away. Just because, we've come to kind of like, sometimes we push against ceiling of our understanding. That's just the reality. We are not God. We're not. We don't understand everything that's going on. So there's a humility there to say like, one of the fruit of the Spirit is long-suffering. Suffer alongside someone. Always with the hope that there's flourishing coming out of that. So, in all your own personal pain, be willing to share the pain of someone else, of this child of yours. And I think that's vulnerable. That deepens your relationship. And I think that is, more than anything, what we're called to.
Yeah, I think I like that, Jennifer. You said you choose love. Like, Marianne, you talked about the choice that we have to walk with our child or the relationship breaks. I mean, I know it's a much more complex decision than that, but I think at the end of the day, it's a question we have to ask ourselves. Yeah. And thank you. One of the things just to, I don't want to diverge from the topic, but I think what you guys brought up was in all of and all the things you shared with us, and even now, was the importance of the faith community of the church. And I was very, very encouraged, actually, by the way you guys talked about the church and the hope for the church. Jorg, especially when you're talking about joining God and the restoration and healing of things. I know that sometimes in some of the conversations I've had with people who are struggling with their mental health, that the church has not necessarily been a safe place for them. They've walked out of here with some pain, some hurt, because people have used some of those things that you talked about, Jorg. You need to have more faith, or it's a sin, or things like that. Yeah. If you guys had one thing that you could just say to us as a faith community to say, hey, here is the number one thing that if you're gonna be a safe space for those who are struggling with mental health, what would that be?
I have mine.
Okay.
I think that what I've noticed again over the years, particularly with my population that I work with, and just in general, is to see people, to really see people and help them to know that they're seen. Even in the church, but I'm thinking of checkout counters where you're like, hey, how are you? And then they'll say, oh, it's okay. And it's like, oh, that's good. But it's like, no, let's connect and ask that question allow people to be really seen. And I know it's sometimes hard in the lobby, but you go out in the church and you're kind of looking for everybody and you're talking, but you're not really talking. So I just think really intentionally taking the effort or having the effort to see people and to hear them. And it doesn't even have to be long, just that they feel like they've been seen somewhere. Yeah, that would be mine.
100 years ago, I used to be a worship leader. And one of the things that
100? Wow.
It feels that way, Dave.
You look so good.
Oh my gosh.
Great for 102.
I'm 110, yeah. I remember training as a therapist near the end of my tenure on stage, and the joy of the Lord and calling out, and it would have been some 90s and 2000 tunes, and looking out and thinking, your dad just died. And I know that you guys are struggling. I know what's happening in your family. And I struggled thinking, how do I have integrity as a worship leader to say, there is joy in the room and let's praise God? And is there a way for us to acknowledge as leaders? And years later, a person who became my father-in-law, I remember him greeting on a Sunday morning, and his job was the host, and he said, please sit or kneel or stand. If you need prayer, we can wander to the back whenever you want to. If you want coffee, go and get it. We are mindful you're all in a very different place this morning, so do what you need to do. And I almost fell off my chair thinking, so I know that churches are better at this now, but I do think explicitly acknowledging that the body of Christ is holding so much different experience, and that's not bad. That's just how we're built. And that sometimes I talk about the elephant in the pew. Elephants are welcome. It's okay. It's okay. A great thought exercise for you and your pastor team is, I was telling these guys, a thought exercise of what would designing a church where it's welcoming of elephants look like? It's crazy. But think, no, what would that look like? It's a different kind of church, right? Giving ourselves permission to be a little outside the box. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
How about we take lament series? What would church look like where we can be honest like the psalmists? Where it's normal, appropriate, and authentic to say, I wish I was never born. Today, that's how I feel. Because that's what they do. That's what I read. That's a psalm. That's in the psalm. And I think there's part of, and it's maybe church leaders, and as pastors, I know it's not always easy, but I think, how do we foster vulnerability where people feel safe to do that? Because God clearly is like, yes, this is part of my words. This is part of the story that I've been telling about humankind. This is not something that we should need to hide. So how do we integrate that on a very practical level? What are the songs that we sing? What are the prayers that we pray? Like, what are the sermons that we preach? What are the topics in our small groups? How do we foster that to say, like, this is real? God thinks it's important. So how do we make this is a place that reflects that?
Okay. No, those are great suggestions. So here's my final question for you, because I think that some of the things that you guys say, how do we make a church for elephants? How do we, like all of these things that you mentioned, it's like, well, yeah, how do we do that? So I want to ask you if you could point us in the direction of some resources that would be helpful for, us congregants who think about, I think about the first question that we addressed about the person that is walking along a sibling with bipolar. Like, what good resources have you guys come across that would be helpful for us sitting in the room and those joining us online?
Well, Chalet Mental Health. So I'd say call me. Dude, I can hook you up. The other thing that I would say is we have a partner, Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries is out of BC.
Yep.
And they took the Alpha series. Is your congregation familiar with Alpha?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They took the Alpha series and translated into stories about mental illness. And it's a study, an 8-week study, a video that you watch, and it will knock your socks off in terms of understanding what safety and community looks like. And then you call me, and I'll.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe it's not a shameless plug. I think I will say Jennifer's organization, just so you guys know, is actually partnered with the Christian Missionary Alliance, we're the denomination that Bayview Glen is a part of, and so there are counseling resources and stuff that we send our pastors and families and things like that to Jennifer's network to walk with them. I do want to plug the Sanctuary course as well, because you guys all know Alpha is free, right? The Sanctuary course is also free online. You can actually go to their website and you can download it.
It's amazing.
It is. I've watched a few of the videos and seen some of the things around it. It is excellent. So, and you can do it with your life group. So there's that. Marianne, resources?
You can come to me. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm just thinking, we Youth for Christ Vancouver, not just recently, they put out a resource. It's called Life Teams is what it's called, but it literally has 1-page resources on a whole bunch of different. Like bipolar. Anyway, there are so many topics. It's an excellent resource. And then, I could send you, I have a whole resource list at home. The one that I'm also thinking of in Toronto, if you're really struggling with, I believe the age, I want to say is 12 till 12. I don't know what the ages that they work with. I'd have to get you more information. It's called the Sunnybrook Navigation Team. And basically what they do is you get connected with them if you're struggling with your young adolescent, or it goes to 29, and they basically set you up, and they'll find you resources across the GTA. It's phenomenal. It's a great resource, but I forget the age distinction in there. And realistically, honestly, if you do have any questions, even just a question, you're wondering about something about your young adolescent or till 30 or family type thing, I am happy to answer those. So it's Rerooted Counseling.
Just before I get before you answer, Shalem, how do you spell that? Just so if anybody wants to look you up.
Shalem. And you pronounce it?
Shalem.
No,
Shalem.
Okay, right, okay, good. And Marianne, if they want to find you, how can they find you?
Yeah, it's Rerooted is REROUTED counseling at yugta.ca.
Okay.
Or you can go to Youth Unlimited. I think it's on there too, but yeah, it's not ROO. It was taken already, but whatever.
It's RU. RU.
Rerooted.
Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, your resources.
2 things.
Yeah.
First, Tyndale Wellness Centre, just around the corner here. What I would recommend, especially if you're in some form of leadership in the church, they run workshops for pastors, for leaders, to prep you for this work. And the second thing, and maybe a little cheeky, read the Psalms.
Yeah.
Just read the Psalms.
Yeah, it's good.
There's very few things better.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I do, just before we thank them officially by clapping them, I do want to give you guys a resource for those of you who call Bayview Glen home. You filled out a survey at the beginning of tonight for Pastor Lisette, who's our care and missions pastor, to kind of help shape the resources that we provide our congregation when it comes to care opportunities. I would say this, that if you are in need of counseling and things like that, or pastoral care, you can jump on our website. It's right in the top bar. There's a thing that says care. You can click on that. It'll take you to a page where there's a short care form to fill out, and then that comes to Pastor Lisette, and she looks after things from there. I know sometimes people are afraid because we know that therapy can be expensive. We have incredibly generous people at Bayview that give to a benevolence fund, and so we're able to offset some of the costs for therapy. So I don't want that to be something, finances, to stop people from getting the help that they need. So please, if you're in that boat, I want to encourage you to jump online and find Pastor Lisette there. All right. Well,
Can I just say something?
yeah,
To that?
yeah.
That is so wonderful. Thank you, Bayview Glen, for doing that. Not every church can do it or does do it. And it's because often finance can be an issue. I want to acknowledge that therapy can feel and be expensive, and to have the support, that's part of why we need that bigger family, the more shoulders to carry each other. And sometimes it's finances. And to give something, maybe you don't know what to do, you feel overwhelmed, it's but I can give a tenner. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And spearheading that.
Oh, thank you. Well, why don't we thank our presenters for coming in today. It has been a gift. Thank you so much for your words, for helping us just understand more fully what it means to be a church who comes alongside and cares for people who find themselves in crisis this way. So, I know it's 10 after 9. We usually try to end at 9. Sorry I kept you guys a little longer. But, we'll be around up front if you have some more questions or things like that. But, thank you guys so much for coming and joining us for the speaker series. Our next one is in November. Wes Huff from Apologetics Canada will be here. So put that on your calendar, November the 8th. And we'll see you. Well, hopefully see you before then. But if not, we'll see you then. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Jesus